Blame Christians? Are globalists getting ready to blame Christians for everything? Totalitarians have learned over the years that if you're going to persecute someone, you want the rest of the population to hate them. So when you imprison them, kill them, take away their possessions, then the rest of the people will rejoice and not revolt. A famous example of this was Nero, who did this with the burning of Rome. He wanted to rebuild Rome according to his plans. So burning down the existing city would facilitate the rebuild that he and his architects wanted. Now at the same time, Nero was annoyed by the Christians who worshipped a god higher than Caesar or any of Rome's other gods. So he decided to fix the two problems with one fell swoop. Burn the city down and blame the Christians for it so that he could persecute, imprison, and kill them. Pretty slick idea. During this persecution, Nero's government killed the apostles Peter and Paul. Peter was crucified upside down and Paul was beheaded. Average Christians were burned alive as torches at Nero's garden parties, and some were fed to the lions as entertainment. Plus, Nero got a fresh canvas on top of the burned city on which to create his new city. And by spreading the rumor that it was the Christians who lit the city on fire, well, he was able to get the common people angry enough with them to want Nero to hurt them or imprison them. So how did Christians threaten Rome, who ruled the whole world at the time? Well, they obeyed a power higher than the government. And they said there was only one way to heaven, through Jesus. And people were joining their ranks right and left. Rome feared a revolt from the Christians and feared that they would convert most of the other people away from their existing gods. These are the exact two things that the globalist world order sees as a problem in Christianity today. Back in Nero's day and today, Christians were being made scapegoats for social problems as an excuse to eliminate them. But globalists want to level the existing order of nation states so that they can impose their new order of a global government. But they need a scapegoat to do this, to take the people's attention off of what they're doing and place it on the scapegoats. Get them angry at the scapegoats, not the globalists. If you aren't seeing this in your community yet, yours is one of the last communities without persecution. But guess what? It's coming. Open Doors International, a nonprofit organization that supports persecuted Christians, has released its annual 2024 World Watch List, which highlights and ranks countries in which Christians face the most severe persecution and discrimination. Open Doors reported that 2023 was the worst year for Christian persecution in the history of the world, worse than Rome's. And tragically, 2024 says it's getting worse. Now, this previous year's World Watch List found that more than 360 million Christians faced severe levels of persecution and discrimination for their faith. This year's report says it's increased to more than 365 million people, with many of them facing dangerously violent persecution. According to Open Doors, more than 14,700 churches or Christian properties such as schools and hospitals were targeted in 2023. That's 7 times the number of attacks that just happened last year. Additionally, in 2023, the total number of Christians who were forced to leave their homes doubled. So just think about that. You have a 7 times increase attacks on churches and church properties, doubling of the number of Christians who are forced out of their homes, and the highest level of severe persecution in the history of the world. If you don't think something's happening, it is. Now, according to the report, North Korea is the most dangerous place in the world for Christians. If a person's Christian faith is discovered, he or she is killed on the spot or shipped to a labor camp where survival is very, very slim. And this is the work of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, who sees Christianity as a threat. In China, Xi Jinping also sees Christianity as a threat to the Chinese Communist Party's power. Last year, at least 10,000 churches, mostly underground churches, were closed in China. In Asia as a whole, 2 in 5 Christians are persecuted for their faith. Christians in India face violent attacks from Hindu extremists and are punished for violating anti-conversion laws in some states. In Africa, it's 1 in 5 Christians who are persecuted. Somalia was ranked as the number 2 country in which Christians face the most extreme persecution, and the terrorist group Al-Shabaab, which has expressed its objective to eliminate all Christians from Nigeria, has made it the deadliest place to follow Jesus. So 2023, as reported in the 2024 report, was the deadliest, most severe persecution against Christians in history. 1 in 6 Christians were undergoing severe persecution over the last 12 months. Why is that? What is so different now from just 10 years ago? First, the time is right for the globalist world order to take over. If you follow this channel, you know that the United Nations is planning to take power over world health care in May in the Pandemic Preparedness Treaty. And in September, they're planning to take sovereignty away from the nations in the Pact for the Future. Who has been at the forefront of opposing these things? Well, Christian channels like ours, even some conservative churches. So the globalist leaders want to silence their opposition so that they can just breeze into power. Not just us on this channel, but you as well. For instance, the idea and research for this video came from a member of our community, Tim Martin. The powers that be want to stop this type of flow of information, but why? Why do they want to silence us? As we frequently say on this channel, the main thing is the main thing. Getting these treaties and pacts approved are the main thing to the globalists. So everything you see in the world around you, from the wars that it's fighting, to LGBTQ rights, to elections, etc., they're all about this. Everything is leading up to the globalists taking over. So one reason you're seeing this now is the time is right. Second, they need a scapegoat. The World Economic Forum held its annual session in Davos, Switzerland, like they do every year, and this year's theme was the restoring trust. Because frankly, the world has lost trust in the globalists. And what better way to restore that trust than to shift the blame for problems from them to someone else like Christians? It's perfect from their perspective. And third, they want to create an us versus them attitude and select people groups around the world so that the globalists can appear to be heroes for punishing the unruly Christians. Identity politics isn't just practiced in Western democracies. Notice what's going on all over the world in places like Nigeria and India, sowing us versus them conflicts so the globalists can pick the winners and the losers in these conflicts by coming against Christians. And this matches what Jesus says precedes the end of the world as we know it. Nation will rise against nation, Matthew 24:7. Now, most readers of this verse think it's referring to countries like USA versus China, but the word nation in the Greek is ethnos, or people group. So Jesus warns that people groups will come against other people groups. It's identity politics. Jesus is warning us against it and the struggles that will result from it. Now, this is nothing new. History has seen every single totalitarian government do these same things, pick winners and losers. In the French Revolution, it was the royalists who were persecuted and guillotined. In Stalinist Russia, it was the owner class, the capitalists. In Germany, it was the Jews. In Maoist China, it was the intellectuals, people of intelligence. By the way, Mao executed 65 million on his rise to power. He is the greatest mass murderer in history. So far, that is. But in all these instances, the totalitarian forces were in charge of a single, limited country or region. The government that's coming will be worldwide, which takes this persecution that's going to be in the future to an entirely different level. Think Mao is bad? In Revelation 6:7-8, we're told that the toll will be 1/4 of the earth. And if that's meaning people, then that would be 2 billion people. Interestingly, that's the estimated numbers of Christians on earth. So we want to get this a little more personal. Think about your country. Have you noticed your government picking winners and Christians as losers in all sorts of social issues and unrest? In almost every nation, a group of winners can be chosen: Hindus, Muslims, atheists, leftists, LGBTQ, climate change fanatics, etc. And in each case, the losers will always include the Christian element. When you control the mainstream media, you can slant any story any way you want. And if you also control the politicians, you can slant the government response any way you want. Now, the Nelson Walters channel community is all over the world, but just think of events in your country, and I'm sure you can see how this is occurring right now in real time. And Open Doors statistics support this. Something like 1 in 6 professing Christians are experiencing severe persecution. If you're not, get ready for it to become much more than just 1 in 6, maybe 50%. On the Nelson Walters channel each month, we have about 400 to 500,000 unique individuals watching our videos. So, we're talking just on this channel, maybe 250,000 people getting ready to be severely persecuted next year. Well, who's behind this and what will it look like in terms of who's behind it? On this channel, we presented a previous video on who controls the world. And we described the various levels of authority. People at one time thought it was their political leaders who were in charge. Many still think this way, but just consider this guy. Does anyone really think he's in charge of his country? Of course not. Even this guy, when he was ready to release the sealed John F. Kennedy assassination files, he was visited that morning by the CIA and chose not to release them. Someone else was pulling the strings, so our government leaders are not calling the shots. In that video, we discussed how the central bankers who control the money of the world are above the government leaders and actually use the central bank money to control those leaders and what they do. And who tells the central bankers what to do? The demonic forces seated in heavenly places that Paul tells us about in Ephesians 6:12. And the world is hurtling toward a final showdown between these powers and Jesus, King of the universe. As you probably know, we're anticipating the final 7 years of human rule on Earth may begin in the fall of this year, with what the UN and globalists are calling the Summit on the Future, and a worldwide covenant that will grant them authority over the nations. One that Daniel 9:27 seems to call the covenant with the many. And whether that happens this year or next, the showdown is coming. And for all the reasons we described, the powers of this world will want to pick winners and losers. So those who survive and remain after the pogroms are firmly in their camp and easily manipulated. So Jesus' followers aren't around. This is the way of the totalitarian regimes throughout history. This time, it will be Christians on the losing side. Joining us will be groups that were persecuted previously: capitalists, intellectuals, Jews, anyone who opposes the central government. But what will the persecution look like? It will look like modern China. Was China chosen by the globalists as a test ground years ago for many of those draconian control mechanisms? Well, maybe it was. Klaus Schwab of the World Economic Forum said the country he most admired was China. Justin Trudeau of Canada said the country he most admired was China. And Joe Biden, he slipped. Instead of saying that he most admired Canada, which is what he was supposed to say, he said China, and then joked, well, now you know what I'm thinking. China, with its surveillance cameras and facial recognition, can track you and monitor you wherever you go. China, with its social credit score system, which rewards and punishes you for every action. China, with its central digital currency, which is rapidly expanding so it controls your bank accounts. And China, with its re-education camps that give you one last chance to conform or else. In the prophetic letter to Smyrna in Revelation, Jesus said to this church that will go through these horrible times in Revelation 2:10, "Do not fear what you're about to suffer. Behold, the devil notice the devil's behind this, is about to throw some of you into prison that you may be tested. See, it's God's test. For 10 days, you will have tribulation. Be faithful unto death, and I will give you the crown of life. So imprisonment awaits many of us, and death after that. Are you ready? When I visit the local prison as part of a prison ministry here, I joke with the believers that there is only a matter of time before I will join them there. And I'm completely serious. So I pay very close attention to what my life might be like in the not too distant future when I'm in that prison with the brothers within that wall. Dietrich Bonhoeffer was imprisoned by the Nazis for his opposition to the government. One day, a fellow pastor was coming to the jail and saw Bonhoeffer and was stunned and said, "Why are you here?" Bonhoeffer replied, "Why aren't you here also?" In other words, why aren't you opposing evil? And all of us will be given that choice to oppose evil or to accept it and conform. Are you thinking right now what choice you might make when it's presented to you? It's important to know that although the forces against the Church of Jesus are very strong, they will not overcome the church. The church will overcome them spiritually. Jesus will return as King and Lord of Lords. And in Daniel's vision, the statue of the 5 kingdoms in Daniel 2, the stone, not cut by human hands, Jesus will pulverize the statue, which represents the human governments. Jesus wins, and if we follow Jesus, we will win too. But it is not a physical, political victory for us until he comes back. We're not going to win in the short term, only in the long term. Look at what Revelation 12:11 says about how we win. And they have conquered him by the blood of the Lamb, by the word of their testimony, for they love not their lives even unto death. We win by sharing the blood of the Lamb, the words of our testimony, and not being afraid to do so, even if we have to face death. This is how we overcome. Are you ready for such things? Is your church ready for such things? I hate to say it, but most are not ready for this. Most are ready to join the world. They're ready to walk the broad road that leads to destruction because it's easy, and avoid the narrow road that leads to life. Jesus said only a few find that narrow road. So expect your church, your pastor, your friends to get swept up in the easy way out. Pray they don't, but accept that they likely will. So what's that going to look like? Click right here to keep watching and find out what happens when our churches, pastors, friends, all betray us. Till then, this is Nelson, and I'll see you there.